Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast with coach, encourager, and strategist Anna McLaughlin. If you're a Christian woman who has big dreams rooted in an even bigger God, but most days those dreams feel completely out of reach, trust me, I get it. As a homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, investor, and all-around wearer of many hats, I am right there with you. And yet the Lord invites us to live out our God-given purpose now in the midst of the madness. So let's explore together how we can know our calling and walk in it today with clarity, with courage, with each other. It's time for you to live the life you love and love the life you live. Let's do this thing.
Hello, friend. Thank you so much for being here for this latest episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. And most importantly, happy Thanksgiving. I don't know about you. I've always been a Christmas girl. I love that holiday. And we are certainly going to talk a lot in the coming weeks about how to make it even more lovely, especially if you're a parent, especially if you start to feel that urgency and that rush and you're trying to keep it at bay and sit in the wonder. But I will say this. As I've gotten older, now that I have children of my own, Christmas, it takes a lot of discipline and thoughtfulness and willingness to kind of stand against the tide of crazy that comes in Christmas time to really enjoy that season. With Thanksgiving, I just feel like there's a little more room. And maybe that's just our crew, maybe that's just the way we handle it. But Thanksgiving has become very precious to me because the expectation is just a lot lower in this holiday, I feel like. It's kind of this breath. Let's just be together. I know it's not that way for everybody. I fully recognize that. So that's actually what we're going to talk about today. We're going to keep this conversation relatively simple, relatively short, because I recognize it is actually Thanksgiving Day. So if you're listening today, hello, how's the turkey coming? How are all the festivities? Listen, permission granted to go to Publix and buy what you need, okay? There is no shame in a grocery pickup on Thanksgiving. Just make it early because you know they're not open late, okay? So I'm glad to be here with you as you're preparing. If you're listening after the fact, I hope that there was much beauty and much rest. And if not, give it to yourself today. So in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we're going to talk about one of my favorite principles, which I've shared in here before. And for me, this really reshaped my conversation with the Lord around the idea of gratitude. The Lord said to me many years ago, gratitude is a balm, B-A-L-M. It's a balm. It is most powerful when applied to the area of hurt. Where are you hurting today? What's feeling hard? Where is there pain? And how can you apply gratitude there? When we sit around the table at Thanksgiving dinner time, it's not uncommon for someone at the festivities to invite this conversation of thankfulness. What are you thankful for? And invariably, we offer these answers, not just at our family table, but I think in many family tables across the nation. We offer these gratitudes that are relatively light. Grateful for family, grateful for friends, grateful for food, grateful for a roof over our heads, grateful for money in the bank to pay for what we need. Yes, yes. But those are easy gifts to love. And what the Lord offers us is something quite different. He says, I invite you to see it all as gift. I invite you to recognize the I am, Emmanuel, God with us. That season is just around the corner, but it's an offering for every day. I invite you to see Emmanuel, God with us, in the midst of the hurt, in the midst of the chaos, the unrest, the grief, the loss, the insufficiency. Find it here, too. And when we do, when we search for it here, in the places of disappointment, in the places of discouragement, in the places of not enough, not the way I hoped, not in accordance with my dreams, then we truly see the resurrection God at work. Okay? So gratitude is a balm. When we can reach that moment of saying, if it weren't for this pain, here are all the things I would have missed. When we can reach that point, then we're free, right? And I've shared in here, if you go back to the Reckoning with Suffering episode, it was about a month or so ago, how the Lord brought me to a point where, and I don't, it's one of those things, it's like you either know it or you don't. But I invite you to consider that there is this place, and it is a place that offers so much fruit and so much wonder and blessing that I want it for you. If you don't know it yet, I want it for you so badly. When my father died, this was the thing. This was the how will I ever survive it thing that I had lived with for decades. It's not that I don't love my mother too, and my brother and my husband and all of these other people in my life, but my father's illness had become otherworldly in its significance in my life. There was a before paralysis and an after paralysis. And just very, very briefly, when I was 13 years old, he contracted a type of cancer that at the time was 100% fatal for adults, acute lymphocytic leukemia. He went through a clinical trial. Half of those people died, and half of those who survived, including my dad, were left with spinal cord injuries because of the chemical cocktail of the chemotherapy. It's gone on to become a very treatable form of cancer, if I understand correctly. Some of this is colored from my understanding as a child almost 30 years ago. But that was the story as I've come to understand it. And because of that experience of he drops me off at school, and then by the time I'm supposed to be picked up at the end of the day, we're on this fast track to insanity and grief and loss. And because of the medical complications that came as a result of his paralysis, there was always this instability around his health. Whether true or not, and I think mostly as I've stepped into adulthood, there was much more going on than just medical realities. There was also just a lot of fear around his condition, around his paralysis. It felt like a breath could take him out at any moment. He was always on death's door. And I think a lot of that was just my own perception because of the trauma around his initial illness and paralysis. So here I walked into adulthood with this gorilla on my back of, how am I going to survive losing him? I can't do it. But when the moment came, when it was time, this grace that I never could have anticipated caught me. And I came to know the Father's love in a way I never could have otherwise. So circling back, through experiencing that, there became this strength of like, what can man do to me? What waits on the other side of my father's passing? Forever. Perfection. Heaven. That's what waits on the other side. What in the world can man do to us when that's the worst that can happen? And yet we're limited. We can't always see that everything's going to be okay. And as each hard thing comes, it's almost like we have this selective amnesia. We have to walk through it all over again. Well, I know it all turned out for good here, but what about this? What about this? We had a tiny little thing a couple weeks ago where my son's leopard gecko got lost in the house. And for 10 days, y'all, 10 days, there is a lizard somewhere in our home. And I'm working with my coach and learning about this process of how do we just let it go? What's wild is his invitation is to practice letting go simply by breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. This is how we release. This is how we let it go. That physical representation. And I think how beautiful that is, because the Holy Spirit is the breath. So when we engage in this letting go process, we're connecting with the physical representation of the Holy Spirit. Not that the Holy Spirit is our breath, but that this is how we can kind of come to understand a little glimmer of how the Holy Spirit shows up for us. The breath of life, right? So here we are with this lizard in the house. And here I just described to you how I reached this point with my father's passing where it's like, what can man do to me? No matter what, there's gift. There were gifts that came to me that never would have if my dad hadn't passed away. And so what I was trying to say earlier is like, we reach this point where we're like, I'm so grateful that I don't have to choose because these gifts have become so precious to me. They've become so much a part of my love for my father that, yes, I would give anything to have him back. And yes, I'm so grateful that I have these things now that I know I couldn't have without the loss, right? And so, and if you want to go deeper into that realm of conversation, I know you're like, Anna, we're supposed to be talking about gratitude. This is part of it. This is part of it. This is where gratitude comes to life, where it lives through us, where we're not just grateful when it's good. We're actually grateful for the things that we could so easily label as bad. And that is where resurrection power is working through us. So back to the lizard. Okay, so here we are. Here we've weathered all these hard things. And I'm about taken out by this lizard being gone, friend. Oh, my stars. Because I'm sitting there going, am I going to find some dead reptile in my house? Am I going to have to smell some sort of something before we figure out where this thing is? And it's my son's pet. It's my youngest son's pet. Okay, this is not anything that I want to be navigating right now. We tore the house apart. We searched everywhere. So we thought, right? Where my husband was like, we would have found it by now, Anna. We would have seen some sort of sign. It's gone. Okay. And I was talking to my coach about this because it's, with coaching, we think about, oh, it's like helping us level up and reach our goals and all this stuff. It's also about how do we live life better? Okay. Now, if you're sitting there going, I'm ready to close the gap between where I am and where I want to go, reach out to me. Let's have an exploratory coaching call. This is the point of coaching. How do we live life better so that we can show up better, so we can serve better, so we can love today? Because we don't get more time. We don't. That's one of the gifts my dad's illness gave me, is to just have this constant reminder of how precious it all is. Okay, so getting taken out by this missing lizard. And I was telling my coach, I was like, I'm letting it go. Like, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go. He's like, are you though? I was like, well, I'm trying. I'm trying to let it go. I would lay there at night, go, okay, Lord, your will be done. Your will be done. Just fully your will. I'm doing the breathing, doing all of it. Let it go. I was like, I feel guilt because I could have, done more to instruct Josh on how to take care of this little guy. I'm feeling apathy, like we're never going to find it. I'm in all these low level emotions, right? Starting to feel just like stuck. And he said, I think the reason you're having a hard time letting it go is because you have not dealt with the core issue of being willing for your son to have his own process. I was in there trying to fix it all, right? If I let it go, if I manage the whole thing, then everything's going to be fine. And in the same way that we've talked about in here before in The Horse and His Boy, how Shasta, then this is the C.S. Lewis allegory that's part of the Chronicles of Narnia. Shasta, one of the main characters, is speaking to Aslan, whom he's just getting to know. And he's kind of complaining to him, why did you let this happen to this other person? And so Shasta says, why did you let this thing happen to Erebus? Why did you let her get hurt in this way? Aslan says, child, I'm telling you your story, not hers. And he says this, no one is told any story but their own. Okay? My son is on his own journey. He has his own lessons to learn. And here I was trying to protect and shield and keep him from ending up with a dead leopard gecko, right? Like that was the nightmare. Please don't let us end up with a dead leopard gecko. How can I control and manage this thing? I had to let that go. I had to place it fully at the Lord's feet and say, okay, Lord, whatever you ordain is right, whatever suffering and struggling my son has to go through is okay. I lay it at your feet. You want to know the wild thing? Evidently, that's the gift he had for me. That was the thing that he had for me to navigate. And it's not like, listen, God is not a vending machine. And sometimes he withholds a good gift because he has a higher gift to offer. And once we've unlocked the higher gift, he's like, okay, and this too. Oh, he's so good. Oh, he's so good. And this too, I withheld for your good. And when you fully received that gift, now I can release the other. And so after that point of surrender of like, okay, Lord, if the best gift that Josh could possibly have is experiencing the deep cost of a mistake, the full loss of his pet, not just missing, but potentially passed away, then okay. And help me be present and for him and loving and all of it. Wouldn't you know, after that whole process, next day we're packing up to go out of town. I open up a drawer, and who should be sitting there in a drawer, y'all? Not 2 feet away from where he got lost, but Bernie the leopard gecko, alive and well, with a slightly smaller tail because evidently they live off the fat stored in their tails. Okay, so that is the goodness of God. That is the goodness of God. He is not, and let me just say it again, to be clear, he is not, and oh, there was such a good, and this is where I'm saying, like, he's not a vending machine God. I don't remember. There's some famous pastor who's more on the charismatic side, does a lot of healings, and his wife died of cancer within the past year. I want to say it's Benny Johnson. I should know, but I can't remember. And he got up to preach the next Sunday, days after his wife's passing. And he said exactly that. Here's this man who has built his ministry on praying for healing for other people. And his wife died. And he said, the Lord is not a vending machine, that he should give us what we want. I'm going to look this up for you. I have to find this for you. It's too good.
Okay, friend, I've got an invitation for you. As a woman of faith looking to serve God and walk in her calling powerfully, it's important that you feel good. And for me, my body completely shifted when I started taking high-quality supplements that were really working with me in balancing hormones, healing my gut, and overall just helping me feel better in my own skin. If you're curious, Modere, the company that I've partnered with, is actually offering their best specials this month. So shoot me a message, find me on social media, and let's get you connected with that tool that's going to serve you so you can serve others.
Okay, so there's this pastor, Bill Johnson, who's built his ministry on praying for healing for people. And his wife died of cancer. And days after her passing, he gets up to preach. He knew he had to be the one to speak, because here he has been at the front lines of this ministry, praying for other people, praying for their healing, praying for transformation, praying for miracles, and has seen them happen. And then he didn't get his miracle. And he said this: there are aspects of God's presence that you can only find in the valley of the shadow of death. It's only in darkness and darkness of soul, in the trial of not knowing what's going on and doing everything you know to do and having things not work out like you think they should. He is not a vending machine. That's where I got that phrase I said earlier. He is not a vending machine. I don't get to put a quarter in and get out what I want. It's a relational journey, and I've experienced his kindness, his miracles at a level I could never earn or deserve. And I just don't have the right to reevaluate what he's like because I have experienced loss. It doesn't work that way. And then he goes on to say, there are these moments of deep challenge where he calls it growing down to become more childlike, the simplicity of faith that just trusts him no matter what. It says, you know what? He knows what's happening and I don't. I'm just going to trust him. So, bringing it back to gratitude. I invite you this Thanksgiving to look at the areas that are hard to look at. Don't miss this opportunity to apply gratitude as a balm to the area of hurt. To open up your hands and say, maybe there is gift here too. It's tempting in these holiday seasons to kind of whitewash it and be like kind of cherry picking. I'm grateful for this thing that looks pretty and this thing that looks happy and this thing that's provision and this thing that's finally changed and this thing that's opened up. And now here's this small handful of blessings that I have marked good. But God invites us to something bigger. We're going to land back where we keep landing, Romans 8:28. He works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purposes. We've got to apply the like heavenly perspective. It's all good. He calls it all good. Not because it feels good or it looks good or it's like not sin tainted or maybe even just like devastating, but because at the end of the day, we serve a redemption God who turns it all right. In the end, it is all right. Everything. Now we can't just kind of gin this up. I don't know if that's the phrase. We can't like manufacture this, right? Don't just slap gratitude like a Band-Aid on top of a festering wound. Rather, once again, air it out before him. Bring those pages before the Lord in the temple like King Hezekiah did. And why can I never remember? Something. 1st or 2nd Kings 18 or 19. It's in there somewhere. Y'all know better than I do by now because I keep messing it up and then I keep figuring it out and whatever. We're just wherever it is. King Hezekiah lays out those pages of the letter from King Sennacherib before the temple of the Lord. He says, you are the God who knows. You're the God who fights. You're the God of victory. You can take this guy out. And then we're going to piece this all together. It's going to be like a mosaic. And then there's that even if, right? Even if you don't do it in the natural, it's finished in the heavenlies because of Christ's work. And if you need one of the most beautiful examples of this idea in a worship song, go and listen to Mercy Me, Even If. Listen while you're cooking dinner. Listen while you're washing dishes. Cry your eyes out. He says, even if you don't. Like, I know you're faithful. I know you can save through the fire by your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. And then there's this bridge. You've been faithful. You've been good all my days. Jesus, I will cling to you come what may. Because I know you're able and I know you can. Okay? So take the hurts, take the hard, take the disappointment, the discouragement, the losses, all of it. Lay it at his sweet feet as an offering. And trust him with it. And say, you know what? I don't see how this is good, but thank you for it. I'm trusting you that something's coming out of this that I can't even fathom. Or one day I'm going to say, because of that, so much has come into my life that I never would have had. We can't see it until we're willing to conceive that it might be gift. Okay? And y'all know, like, there are people who never get out of their pain. They're still living in that loss decades later. The resentment, the injustice, the hurt, the grief, it keeps them tethered. But when we can open our hands and go, there are gifts here that I could never imagine. There are gifts here that if I didn't have them, I would feel their loss so profoundly, I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. We have to come back to that, okay? And trust that the gift is there. All of life is gift, my friend, if we allow it. All of life is gift under his mighty hand. Doesn't mean there's not sin, doesn't mean there's not depravity, doesn't mean there's not deep injustice and wrongs. What it means is he promises by his miraculous, wondrous plan to turn it all to good. What's the worst that can happen? Eternity. That's what's waiting on the other side. So I invite you this Thanksgiving to apply gratitude as a balm on an area of hurt. If you do so, would you tell me about it? I want to know. Let's share in this together. I would be honored to behold and bear witness to the good work he is doing in your life. Okay, friend. I meant for this to be a super short episode, but you know, we just go all kinds of places, don't we? So we'll leave it here for now. I wish you the most beautiful Thanksgiving. Until next time, remember, as always, you got this because he's got you. Take care.
Friend, thank you so much for listening to this most recent episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. So listen, the whole idea behind this mission is that when we endeavor to be brave with our lives, we need to do it together. Belonging is key. So if you resonated with the message from this episode, share it with a friend. Do it together. Thank you again. And until next time, never forget, you've got this because he's got you.